So, I saw the recent My Hero Academia movie 4, You're Next, and let me just say, pretty good. Pretty good. Hey guys, how's it going? It is your boy, Manga Andrew, and I'm here to do a different kind of review. I'm going to be doing a review and giving my thoughts on the most recent movie that has officially come out in the My Hero Academia franchise, My Hero Academia Movie 4, You're Next. There's a lot that I really want to talk about when it comes to this movie. I just recently watched it as of recording this video, so there's a lot that I want to go over. So I'm going to start off by going over the plot of the actual movie itself, and then go into what I liked and disliked about the story, as well as potentially giving my overall score of the entire movie towards the end. Also, a few things that I want to bring up before I dive into the plot of the movie is talk to you about where this movie takes place within the timeline of My Hero Academia. Because most of the movies that we've seen takes place within the canon of My Hero Academia in one way or another. And if you've seen My Hero Academia season 7 all the way up to where we are right now, you can probably guess that, yeah, this movie is also canon. So the timeline is that this movie takes place in between where we see Star and Stripes fight and the war actually beginning. So it takes place within like that few day time frame, which makes sense for where this movie takes place. And you'll see more what I mean when I go into the actual story proper. But yeah, that's where the movie takes place, and there's some more stuff that I will be saying in the actual review, so let's get back to it. So with that, let's go right into how this movie was being set up and to go over the summary of it. And to start off, from what we saw with the trailers, not a whole lot about the actual story you can glean from the trailers, so that's good. But for the most part, what we see in the trailer is what we get towards the beginning of the movie, as well as they also release sort of like a sneak peek to like the opening prologue as we get the introduction of the evil All Might, or in the movie he's called Dark Might, and how he's being inspired by All Might, as well as we get to see Deku as well as the other members of Class 1A doing something that I'm glad that they were able to do in the actual movie that we really don't get a lot of in the actual final parts of the manga, of seeing them actually take down jailbreakers, as we see Deku take down the jailbreakers and is sort of getting a glimpse of one of the sort of secondary characters, or sort of the secondary focus of this movie, whose name is like Gilio or Julio. It's spelled a little bit differently, but we get to see they get a slight interaction before we get the sort of like opening animation, seeing like a whole bunch of like great music, seeing who's going to be in the movie, from the students of Class 1A to even some of the pro heroes, as we tie into like the biggest story point of the entire story, where Class 1A is separated. They all have their fun interactions, and I will say this is something that I really liked about this movie that we kind of got in the second movie, of just seeing the Class 1A at this point just interacting with each other, and we get a fair amount of that in this movie. While we don't get a whole lot of focus on characters such as Hagakure and like the other characters on Bakugo or Ida's team, the fact that they're able to interact is something that I enjoyed the most of this movie. But going more into the summary, we see that Deku meets Gilo, as we see that Deku is following this individual and is interacting with Anna and gets a sort of gist of what her power does. And we later learn that her power is the ability to like modify the quirk factors and either amplify them or cause them to grow, which is why we get to see like a heteromorph and how his quirk grows and develops more as Deku is fighting and following him. As then we are introduced to like the main cast of villains who take Anna and are able to allow for Deku as well as Gilo to actually interact properly for the first time, setting up a very important like plot point that is going to be tied in towards the end of the series, about Gilo trying to literally kill Anna. Obviously, if you know how stories work, he's doing it for a altruistic reason, but eventually Deku is able to convince him not to do that, but we'll talk about that when we get there. But then we're introduced to the evil All Might and how he is twisting the ideals of All Might proper when it comes to like what it means to be the symbol of peace, which really gets on Deku's nerve. But then we get to get something that I didn't think that we were going to get. We get to see the main villain actually use Anna and actually use her quirk to pretty much amplify his own quirk, which is called alchemy, which is an explanation for what we get in the movie, where he's able to like create things out of the coins and like able to incorporate both people as well as the surrounding area into his ship. and that by doing so, his main goal is to try and take out All Might, as well as be the next symbol of peace, but doing it in a very twisted and maniacal way. And how, because all of the students of Class 1A are in the vicinity, they are the only heroes that are inside of the actual like moving fortress, so eventually they have to work together as well as work separately to try and rescue and allow for the individuals or the people who also got caught up in it to escape, as we get to see more interactions between Deku and Gilo. And there's a fair amount of like fun interactions with Deku as well as the characters bouncing off of each other. And this is where I will say that a lot of what this movie has is very much a combination of movies 1, 2, and 3 when it comes to the story, plot, and character interactions, where the main villain is very similar to the main villain of movie 1, where the actual plot itself and the character interactions are more like movie 2, and the interactions that Deku has with Gilo is very much synonymous with the interactions that Deku has with Rhodey in movie 3. And if you've seen all the other movies, you can kind of see where this fourth movie is going. But as we get more interactions between them, we see that they're eventually able to take out the villains under like the main bad Dark All Might one by one, and how I will say that when it comes to this movie, and I guess I won't be saving it for the end, but just sprinkle my opinions and thoughts intermittently in this actual review, but I will say that the villains are probably the weakest part of this movie, which probably makes it potentially one of the worst movies in My Hero Academia's movie franchise. Now, that doesn't mean that it's bad. I really pretty much enjoyed this movie as a whole, but the villains are overall probably the weakest part of the actual movie, even though some of them have very interesting quirks, which are very similar to quirks that we've seen in like My Hero Academia proper. Like, one individual has the ability to like erase and shut off quirks like Eraser, but he can only do it with like a dome, but he has like a part of the dome near him where his quirk or the quirks of his allies can be active. So we get fun action sequences with Deku using his like natural toned abilities to be able to get around that. But then we also see Bakugo and his gang take out like a sort of game master and being able to take him out, as well as eventually Deku and Gilo interact with Anna and the very busty evil Demetrius woman, who I will say probably has one of the more interesting quirks, very similar to like Midnight's being able to put people to sleep, but instead is able to put them in a dream world. And how I like how they were able to incorporate the vestiges of One for All in a way that allows for Deku to be able to get out of the dream world, but be able to use Gilo's like inherent abilities to both portray Gilo's character and like why he's doing and wants to kill Anna, as well as setting up for an important plot point that's going to play a major role in the final battle. So I do like how they were able to like interact with the villains, but the villains themselves are probably the weakest part. But yeah, after we get the resolve of Deku to want to save Anya, as well as Gilo being convinced to be able to save Anna instead of just straight up killing her, which is a very cool interaction and may be alluding to how Deku is potentially going to be in the final war and the final act and the final fight against Tomoe Shigaraki, and how he may or may not be able to save him. The fact that Deku focuses on saving first is very much within his character and pretty much fits within the story of My Hero Academia, as we get pretty much what we get in any of the My Hero Academia movies of the Class 1A separating, as we get probably an interesting aspect of like the 4 strongest students in Class 1A going towards the location of Dark Might and trying to take him out. And like I said, when they're separated, the fights are very well animated. That is something that My Hero Academia movies always have, very well animated fight sequences. And even the final fight sequence of the movie is animated well, but I do have issues with it, and I'll get there when I get to that point. But yeah, we get to see that they separate. What is very cool is that we get to see both Deku go off with Gilo, as well as their bond developing more and more the closer they get to Anna, as well as getting to see both Bakugo and Shoto team up to go up against these villains, and how they defeat them in a very fun and creative way, and even having Tokoyami being shown to be one of the stronger individuals, but him having probably the weakest fight of the entire movie. As we're approaching the end, where we get to probably my favorite part, where we get to see Deku going up against Dark Might, and how he's not able to defeat him outright, but with the help of both Gilo, as well as the pro heroes outside, able to make a hole to both get people in and get other people out, as well as a fun cameo of Muriel actually being a part of this movie, which is something that I actually didn't expect, but I'm glad that they were able to include him as well as the other pro heroes, even though they do not have like a very prominent aspect of the story when it comes to the entire movie as a whole. I'm glad that they are there. But what I like probably most about the movie is like pretty much the start and the middle of the fight with Deku going up against Dark Might. Deku showing his conviction, showing why he is a successor to All Might, and also All Might saying that the students of Class 1A are his successors, not just Deku, but all of them are. As we see that the reasoning why Deku was able to defeat this Dark Might is not because that he is objectively stronger or more powerful than Dark Might, but that he was able to work together with both Shoto as well as Bakugo to defeat him. And like this entire sequence I loved. I may not be able to show it, but you just can imagine just the entire sequence of like Deku and Bakugo and Shoto all working together, all using their quirks simultaneously, but also having their quirks interact in fun ways, specifically when it comes to Deku using Black Whip and using literally Shoto to swing him around and move him around to overpower and get close enough to Dark Might to land like some massive hits. And while this is all happening, we get to see a little bit more of Dark Might's past, which is probably, like I said, the weakest part of the story, but we do get to see his real face, and it's real ugly. And what we get with his backstory fits with the story of My Hero Academia's 4th movie, but overall it's still the weakest part of the movie. However, I do like his facial expressions where he's taken out by the students. And what else I like about the movie is how we're able to like expand the world of My Hero Academia by introducing, ironically enough, European gangster mafia individuals and how that is related to the villains who they are right now, as well as getting a better understanding of Anya's power and how she can only amplify quirks and quirk factors of certain individuals, which plays a role towards the end of the actual battle, where it's realized that because it's only a select few, that what actually happens is that Gilo, who has the ability to like neutralize quirks, is able to neutralize it with the help of Anya, him being one of the very few that could actually do it, but that he was unable to do it prior because he lost his arm, and that he was only able to neutralize it with his right arm, but because of Anna's like ability, it was able to spread throughout his entire body. What I liked about the ending is that it gets done and that the big bad does get defeated, but the main focus isn't Deku beating down the big bad, but is Gilo and his story arc wanting to kill Anna at first, but then eventually learns how to save her with the help of Deku, and eventually he does save her and is able to get her quirk under control. And if you've been watching the anime, that was kind of spoiled for us and potentially spoiled by the post-credit scene, which unfortunately I did not see, but most likely had something to do with what we got in the anime of them being in one of the shelters, which if you've seen the anime and you've seen these reviews of me reviewing the anime, you already knew that they survived towards the end. So yeah, that death fake out that we see at the end of the movie, yeah, if you've seen the ending of one of the episodes, or if you've been watching the My Hero Academia season 7, you knew that was coming. But still, I kind of liked that Gilo was the one that actually saved Anna and wasn't like explicitly Deku. And I will say that while the first part and the second fight of like the final fight was very good, I think that the last part of it was like probably the weakest part. Where yes, we get to see a bunch of cool action sequences of both Bakugo, Deku, as well as Shoto going full throttle, and the animation itself looks spectacular. I loved how it looked throughout the entire movie. However, I do not think that it was necessary and that we could have just had the actual story end with all of the characters passing out except for Gilo, and that Gilo was able to reactivate his quirk to save her, and we didn't need to see the bad guy being taken out a second time. However, I do like how they were able to take it out, and it was animated just spectacularly, and it was just so bombastic. But what was important about it is that it was a joint effort, which is very important with something that the story is telling us, which is that Deku couldn't do what All Might did, but he could have with the help of everyone working together, which is kind of like a running theme of My Hero Academia, so I'm glad that they were able to incorporate it into the movie. Also, this may be a little bit weird because as I was recording this video, there was a lot of other stuff that I missed from my initial recording. So there's a few things that I want to bring up, particularly when it comes to the movie, that I liked about it. For instance, I'm not sure if I really pretty much stated it just outright, but I love the interaction that we get with Anna as well as Gilo, or Julo. I may have been saying that wrong throughout the entire review, but I watched it in English sub, so sue me. But yeah, I love their interactions throughout the movie, as well as like the smaller details involving these characters. For instance, when it comes to Anna, we see that with her quirk, the more that her quirk is used, the more her blonde hair turns to like a sort of dirty brown or sort of a dirty gray, which leads to what we get at the end of the movie. When it fully, completely consumes her, her quirk goes on a muck, goes on a rampage. I love how the implication of how her quirk works and how it's used is that it produces all of these flowers, which you can see throughout the movie, as well as you can tell when someone's been boosted by her quirk, when you see a sort of rose on like some part of the body. So that was something that I noticed, and I like that smaller detail, both like within the story as well as the aesthetic of it. But when it comes to Gilo, he also has like smaller things about him that I really enjoyed. I like how his quirk has nothing to do with the robotics on his body whatsoever. Pretty much it's stated that those are support items and that it's due to like the fight and the combat that he was in that led him to losing all these body parts, but also led to like Anna being taken by Dark Might. And what I liked about it, and I explained it more in the actual review proper, is how it was able to act as not just as like a part of his character, but also played more into the role of the story, which led to Anna being freed both times. As like his right arm has been turned into a gun. He also has a small little pistol on him. His eye is mechanical, as well as we get to see that his leg, which we didn't know prior, was also robotic, specifically his left leg. And what's very cool is like we get to see more of his character and how he has this type of like cold demeanor, but that he actually truly cares on the inside, which eventually leads to both him as well as Anna getting together potentially at the end of the movie. So I liked his interactions with her throughout the movie, and once again reiterate, I love their interaction that they have with Deku and how it's less bromancy and more friendship. But also I just want to also just emphasize a little bit more of what I liked. Like, for as much of a character that Dark Might is, which is very little and very shallow, I still liked how he acted in the movie and how he kind of twisted the ideals of All Might, but he acted in like this just very chauvinist as well as just like doofus way, but he was also just very entertaining as well as lovable. Like, I love how Dark Might interacts with the characters within the story, how he's both comedic in some instances, but also pretty much just outright kills some of his subordinates. And probably the best part of his attacks is that one of them is literally named Baloney Smash, and another one is Torino or Gran Torino Smash. I just love his characterization in the movie. He's a weak villain, but an amazing character. And something else I want to point out is probably my favorite action sequence throughout the entire movie. The ending, like I said earlier, was just bombastic, but my favorite part is just the sequence of Deku just hammering into Dark Might using all of his named attacks, and they all have something different. Like, he does California, St. Louis, Wyoming, and you get to see like the byproducts of those attacks throughout the entire series on Dark Might, to do the X across his chest, to I believe St. Louis, which is like the tornado. We get to see Deku do all of those attacks in sequence, and it looked amazingly choreographed. Also, the other part of the movie that I really liked is the character that is able to put people in dreams, because what I liked most about that is we get to see like the inner like characters and get to see them as who they are, what they want to be. And so we see them in the certain dreams. And the one that really got me emotionally was the dream sequence of Shoji walking alongside of the girl that he saved, which ties into probably my favorite moment from season 7. As well as the sequence of like Deku wanting to meet All Might, but that he was able to sort of like free himself from that dream world thanks to the vestiges, but that he wasn't able to break out of it, but he was able to allow for Gilo to break out of it with his interactions, which I loved. But more importantly, the one that I like the most is the sequence with Shoto, where we see that he's able to play with his older brother Toya, Natsu, as well as Fuyumi, as they are being like this very like cohesive family, as Rei and Endeavor are being like good parents to him, which I watched that, I'm like, oh, that is so precious. Oh, that made my heart swell. So yeah, what this movie does great when it lacks with the actual plot as well as the villains is the small character interactions as well as the characterization of the characters in this movie, which is what I enjoyed the most. All right, and that's pretty much it. So back to the old me, and if there's anything else that I forget, I'll probably put it right here, and if not, back to what I was doing prior, talking about how I felt about the movie overall. And I knew there's also something else that I really want to talk about. What I liked about this movie is that we get to see the heroes be heroes throughout this entire movie. Like, we get an entire sequence of the movie of just seeing the individuals of Class 1A, as well as Deku, Bakugo, Shoto, all of them, just being heroes and actively saving people. I know, shocker, but I love how we get to see the heroes actually be heroes, as Deku is like destroying rubble, preventing them from falling on the people, to even just the characters who are more like not combat oriented, focusing on the evacuation before they go actually fighting. That's something that I enjoyed a lot. Even the sequence of the pro heroes doing their best to make sure that everyone is safe. Heroes saving people. A main theme of heroics, as well as a main theme of My Hero Academia. I loved it. So yeah, that's also something else that I wanted to bring up that I forgot that I loved about the movie. And yeah, that's pretty much the movie as I remember it. But yeah, this is my review for My Hero Academia Movie 4 You're Next. I thought it was a very solid movie and is comparable to the other movies within the My Hero Academia franchise. If I were to put it as like a level, I would probably put it on the same level of movie 3, which is slightly above movie 1, but movie 2 takes the cake for me and will always be my best and favorite movie. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. I liked how it was animated. There was a lot of fluid animation, very few still frames. I liked how clean it looked, even compared to what we've been seeing in season 7. The story could have been done a lot better, but it was still good and coherent with a lot of cool aspects to it that I enjoyed, as well as just a lot of very funny moments that, while not a lot of people in my movie theater were bursting out laughing, I enjoyed the humor of it, so I enjoyed it a lot. Also, I can't say that me meeting some very cool people there probably boosted the score up a little bit. So if they're watching, hey, hi. Yeah, I thought this was a very solid movie. And I just want to ask you this. If you've seen the movie, what did you think about it? Did you like it? Did you dislike it? What was your favorite part? And one final thing, do you think that we should be getting another movie? Leave your thoughts down below. And don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel for more content like this. Do all that cool jazz, and hopefully I'll be able to catch you in my next video. Goodbye!